Here we are once again just to discuss some of the shilas that I got this past week and from the questions that people send in. I have a lot more than what I'm going to discuss today. I've been Baruch Hashem getting a lot, but please keep sending in and we'll get them in the next following weeks. I think there's a link hashivenu.org/ask, A-S-K, or just at my email, which is avizakutinsky@gmail.com. Okay, so to run through, question number one is, what is the reason why the Zman Mincha does not say Tachanun throughout the year? So I don't know exactly what that means, the Zman Mincha. Let's go like this. Tachanun is said during Mincha. It should be said during Mincha. Now, what's evolved is that many Hasidim, or Nusach Svard, do not say Tachanun by Minchas that are around Shkia time. And I could only discuss, let's say, by Hashivenu. We do not say Tachanun by the Shkia minyan, but we do say Tachanun by the Plag minyan. Now, the reason for this is like this. Basically, by the Plag minyan, I have not found a legitimate reason not to say Tachanun then. Not that I'm looking, but I have not found a legitimate reason. There's no reason not to. Now, why is it that many Hasidim do not say Tachanun by the Shkia minyan? So, let's explain. The Beis Yosef in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph writes that you do not say Tachanun at night. Now, at night is after Tzeis HaKochavim. Al Pi Kabbalah, Tachanun, he says, Anoifel Pneim Balayla Hareza Chas V'Shalom Korav Mekatzes Benetiyas Chas V'Shalom. It's close to uprooting the saplings. It's a Kabbalistic term for basically not good. Whatever this means, not good. We do not say Tachanun after Tzeis. Now, what about after Shkia? Meaning, after sunset, before Tzeis is Bein Hashmashas, so it's Safik Yom, Safik Laila. So are you allowed to say Tachanun then? So the Mishabura and Sif Katan Yud Zayin says you do say Tachanun. So it seems like from the Mishabura you should be saying Tachanun even after Shkia. However, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Halicha Shlomo, this is in Daf Kuf Samach Beis of the first volume, and it's also Rav Nebensil brings it down in his commentary on B'Yitzchak Yikari on the Mishabura, that he also brings out from Rav Shlomo Zalman that the minhag in Yerushalayim is they do not say Tachanun after Shkia. The reason being is because there were some Mekubalim brought down by the Kaf HaChaim in Sivkat Nun Aleph. There were some Mekubalim that felt that the same way you're not allowed to say Tachanun after Tzeis, you should not be saying Tachanun after Shkia because it's a Safik Laila. And because you're dealing with Sakanas, that it's a dangerous thing to say Tachanun at the wrong time, Al Pi Kabbalah, therefore not to say it after Shkia. Because of this, the Munkach Rebbe, the Minchas Laws of Munkach, in his Sefer Divrei Torah Chelik Gimel Siman Pei Gimel, he brings down that this is the source of the evolution that many Nusach Sfar do not say Tachanun by the Shkia minyan. The reason being is because often, by the time you get up to Tachanun, it's past Shkia. I could say by Hashivenu, I'm not by the Shkia minyan all the time. I'm by the Plag, I don't Plag, but I would say, depending on the week, depending on the schedule, probably 85 to 90% of the time, right? If you start mincha 10 minutes before Shkia, and you have the silent Shemon Esrei, and you have the Chazar Sashatz, by the time you're up to Shkia, by the time you're up to Tachanun, it's already past Shkia. So it's very close. It's within a minute, 30 seconds. So it's past Shkia, and therefore that is the minhag by Chasidim that Shkia minyanim they do not say Tachanun. Now, there's no reason, to my knowledge, not to say Tachanun by a Plag mincha. It's mincha, but it's not near Shkia. I saw the Truas Mishnah Halachos Chelik Ches Siman Chav Ches. Menashe HaKotan, he says the same thing. He says Lo Matzisi Tam Nachum L'Zeh, but there's no reason not to. Okay, but by the Shkia minyan, even though the Mishabura says to say Tachanun, the minhag of many Chasidim is not to say Tachanun by the Shkia minyanim because it's past Shkia, and that's the minhag by Nusach Sfard. And I'll just say this: what if you're davening by Nusach Sfard, but you follow the Mishabura? So should you say Tachanun when no one else is saying Tachanun? So in Halicha Shlomo, let me read you a few lines. Today's learning will have a little more insight because I think it adds depth to it as opposed to me just talking. Rav Shlomo Zalman is quoted as saying as follows: Im nishmetu ha-mitzibar meloy metachanu b'mincha. If the tzibur is not saying tachanu by mincha, but not for any specific reason, just a mistake, or they're just not saying tachanu, then yetzei l'chutz v'yomer. Then step outside and say it. Meaning you can't say it in front of them, but because it's like a bizayin, but say Tachanun. Elaim kein minig kavuhu ba'isei beis haknesses. Says Rosh Zalman, unless the minig in that shul is to not say Tachanun at that minyan, then he says, K'moi chelik mekalos chasidim. Then you don't say Tachanun. Why not? He explains, Shekivan Shemashe in Oimrim Mukam Imam, because the reason why they're not saying it is not because they just don't care about halacha. They have a legitimate reason. Right? Let's say it's around Shkia, Shuzman Shal Dinim, Lochen al Yishanim, Minhag HaMakom. Therefore, you just keep the minhag. You don't say it on your own. V'af b'shachris, so you can't say it then anyway. And he says, even b'shachris, if let's say you're in a shul, that the tzibur has a minhag, they don't say tachanun on a certain day. He says like a chassid, the day of the yahrzeit of the Rebbe, you don't, like a chassidim, let's say they have the minhag, they don't say tachanun by the yahrzeit of the Rebbe. So even though, I mean, you're like, well, what sheikhs to me? So Rosh Hashanah basically says like this, you're not going to say it right away after Shemana Esrei, because that'll be Parish Shemana Tzibur. So the question is, should you say it after davening? He says no. Why? Because again, it's not a mistake of the Tzibur. Then you would say it, because you don't have to avoid breaking away from the Tzibur when the Tzibur is making a mistake. That's their minhag. The ikr is manei birasin shu samach l'shman esrei. So you're not going to say it after Shemana Esrei because they have a minhag not to, and I'll parish Shemana Tzibur. To say it after davening and not at the right place. The ikr place is right immediately following Shemana Esrei. Once it's already not immediately following Shemana Esrei, then you don't have to say it. Okay. So that explains why you don't say it by Shkia, but I would think by a regular mincha, other than a Shkia minyan, Tachanun should be said. Okay. Question number 2. This next one, a little bit, there's a lot of stuff here, but I'll just tell you my opinion, and it's not my opinion, who I'm quoting, and if it bothers people, I apologize. This is just, I'm sure there's different views. This is just the approach that I believe is Rubai Kekulei of the Paiskei Hadar. Recently, I saw a video touching on the topic of going up to Har Habayis. Are there any areas that would be allowed to go up in the perimeter of the Dome of the Rock? So it's like this. It's a very loaded question. Let's begin. The Rambam paskins, and we paskin like the Rambam, that Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel Shaita B'Kitchel Asad Lava, which means the Beis HaMikdash, or the Temple Mount today, still has Kedusha. And the halachos of where a person is allowed to go when they're in a status of Tumah still apply. Okay. So because of this, that would mean that the halachos of Tumah are still relevant. Now, every person nowadays, even if you go to the mikveh properly, is a Tamei Meis. Now, a Tamei Meis is allowed to go on Har Habayis. He's just not allowed to enter the Azara. So, you want to know, the question is, can a person go on Har Habayis? Can a person go on Har Habayis, just not up to the Azara? Now, in order to go up to Har Habayis, even if it was permitted, which I don't believe that it is, even if it was mutter, you would have to go to the mikveh properly, because although a Tamei Meis is allowed to go on Har Habayis up to a certain point, other tumas are not. Let's say a Tamei Sheretz or a Zav or a Nida is not. So the person would have to go to the mikveh properly, mamish properly, not just like avoiding kares type of properly. You wouldn't be allowed to wear shoes. You wouldn't be allowed to bring your wallet. There are certain halachas. Now, practical halacha, no. We are not allowed to go to Har Habayis at all. The reason being is Kimat, all the Gedolei Yisrael have paskin that it's a problem. Ravad Yosef in Yeridea Simin Chelik Hey of Yabia Omer, Yeridea Simin Chaf Hey, he ends off a very, very lengthy, in Chavav, I'm sorry, end of Chavav. He ends off the discussion. He says to go up to the Har Habayis at all, even after going to the mikveh, is not allowed. And he says, because he says practically it is very, very difficult to know exactly where the areas are. Even though the Radbaz writes that the Evan HaShasiyah, which is under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is the Evan Shasiyah, so that's where the Aron was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But to know the other parameters of where the other areas, where the Azara begins, he says is very, very difficult. And he says, Ravadia says, even though you could figure it out like this, you say, well, I know that's the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's where the Aron was. That's the Al-Aqsa is over the Aron. I know that the Kaisel is the wall of the of Har Habayis. He says, by the way, the Ravaz himself thought that the Kosel was the wall of the Azara, not the wall of Har Habayis. So it shows you it's not so pasha. But even though it is the Har Habayis, and we also know that between the Har Habayis and the Kodesh HaKadoshim is 500 Amma, We still don't know the dimensions of where the Azara begins. It's too challenging. And he says, even though Taisus Yomtiv says it's 100 amis, it's a guzma ba'alma, and therefore bevadai sheyesh lehisrachek lishamesh loy lekanes Har Habayis afil achar tefillah tzarich mitzvah. A person should not go because someone will go too far. And even if you say I'm an expert, which who's to say that you know? But if someone will see you and go too far, it's chayiv karis for no. There's no positive. There's no, It's not like if you go on Har Habayis, Mashiach's going to come. It's not like you're closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu over there. There's no win. It's not just high risk, high reward. It's a high risk and no reward. And Yitzchak Yosef in Shuvas Rishon LeZion, which is Ravadi's son, the former chief Sephardi rabbi, he has a couple shuvas about this, and he says very stark that we don't go. And he says you don't even have to start getting into this and that. Once Rubik Kekulav the Paiskim say it's not allowed, and he lists the Paiskim, some of the Paiskim who said that it's aser, including Rav Kook. So by the way, to think that it's Rav Kook Assorted, Rav Ben Sina Uziel, Rav Herzog, Rav Unterman, Rav Moshe Leo, Rav Shalom Ashash, Rav Shlomo Zevin, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Adi Yosef, Rav Cheskel Abramsky, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Shach, the Stipler, Rav Elyashiv, the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Ezer Atiyah, Rav Tzal Zolti, Baba Sali, Va'oid. And once Rubai Kekulai of Paiskei Hadar say something is aser, then we don't do it. But that is the background of it, and the main potential issue is that we don't exactly know where the Azara begins. Because that's the point where Tami Meis, there's a certain point where Tami Meis is not allowed to enter, and to know exactly where it is borderline impossible, and again, like I said, zero reward for it, and all the Paiskei Hadar say it's also, and therefore that's the end of it. Okay, question number 3. Why do Ashkenazim sit for Lecha Dodi? It's been a long time since I davened with an Ashkenaz minyan, but I believe they're right, that most of Lecha Dodi they do sit. So I don't think it's a shayla of why they sit. I think it's more of a shayla of why do you have to stand. I think in the sitter, you're allowed to sit by davening until told otherwise. The minig of Svard and Svardim is to stand. The reason being is because Chida, Adara says the same thing, that the Adara writes like this: Anunoigim la'amid lasas dugma kamoishim mekabel pnei adam gadol. We stand by Lecha Dodi because it's greeting the Shabbos queen, so you stand up to greet someone chashiv. Ube'emes hu talmid aruch b'Shabbos, and the truth is, there's an allusion to this in the Gemara Shabbos. The Gemara Shabbos says, "Uchanina ma'atif v'koy apanya demali Shabbos." Ma'atif means he would wear talis v'koy, he would stand up and then turn around to greet the Shabbos queen. So Nusach Ashkenaz also stands for the end, but I think Nusach Sfard stands for all Lecha Dodi, but that it has to do with this. I don't think there's a chiyuv to stand other than, meaning you're allowed to sit until told otherwise. That's always the way I look at it. I could be wrong. Okay, question number 4. I have a plastic water bottle which I fill up and drink from throughout the day. Sometimes I eat for lunch dairy and sometimes meat. Is it okay to drink from the bottle at each meal? So the Mechaber in Yeridei Siman Peiches writes as follows: you should be careful shaloi lishtais mikli echad, not to drink from one kli during a meat meal and during a dairy meal, because there's schmutz on your mouth, and if you're eating a burger and drinking from a can of soda or a cup, the schmutz will go on the can, and then if you're eating pizza and drinking from the same can, the schmutz will mix. So you should not do that. So you can have it after the meal, or I guess in between each meal you'll have to rinse it off. But to use one cup, like a Stanley, these type of things, to use it while you're eating, after the meals and your mouth is already clean, that's one thing. But during the meal, it's something that the Mechaber says you should be careful with. Okay, question number 5. Does frozen fruit require a hechsher? Are there any exceptions? What about vegetables? So these type of questions, I always go to the CRC website. AskCRC.org is a great website. I'll read you what they say about frozen fruit. Canned, jarred, and frozen fruit are acceptable without certification if they only contain fruit, sugar, ascorbic acid, malic acid, and or citric acid, and are not from Israel or China, because it's a Trumas Amaisus. China, I'm not sure about. Accordingly, those which contain flavors, colors, carmine, fruit juice, grape juice, or other sensitive additives must bear a reliable kosher certification. Okay. Non-organic frozen straw raspberries, blackberries, and mulberries can only be used if pureed, which we'll talk about in a moment, because of bugs. So frozen fruit are mostly fine. Regarding frozen vegetables, they write as follows. Certain vegetables require cleaning or checking to ensure there are no insects, and the same applies when they are in frozen form. Consumers should check the status of the individual items for assistance. Aside from this issue, most frozen vegetables are acceptable even without certification, with the following exceptions that require hashgacha. A. Artichoke hearts, asparagus, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, potatoes, spinach, sweet potatoes, winter squash, all need a hechsher. B. Those containing added ingredients such as color, flavor, oil, pasta, sauce, or spices, and those that are packed in Eretz Yisrael. Now, mentioned before about pureeing, that frozen fruits, certain types of fruits, like blueberries, I think, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, and mulberries, are only allowed to be eaten if they are pureed. So what is this? What's the issue with, where is this coming from? So, it has to do with like this. Every time you have a food that the kashrus organizations say don't eat, let's say because of bugs, so fresh blackberries are a problem, Brussels sprouts are a problem. So you ask yourself, well, what's the big deal? The bug is tiny. It should be nullified. Batal berov, batal b'shishim, batal. It should be batal. It's nullified. The reason why it's not nullified is because it's called a beria. A beria means that it's the entire isser is complete the way Hashem made it, and it's a living isser, it's a bug, so it's not batal. It's called beria. Now, once the bug is broken apart, it's no longer a beria. So technically, let's say you have a bug that gets injured, and it's an ant that gets split in half. So then it's for sure batal. Because the only reason why it's not batal is because it's chashiv, because it's a full berry, it's a full complete unit, the way Hashem made it. But once it's broken apart, then it's like any other isser, which is nullified berov or shishim. Either way, the bug is tiny compared to the fruit or vegetable. So the truth is, if you think about it like this, you'll always be able to eat fruits and vegetables as long as you make sure the bugs are broken apart. So you say to yourself, okay, I want to eat this thing, so I'm just going to break apart the bug. What's the potential issue? The potential issue is that there's a concept in halacha called ein mevatlin isser l'chachila, which means you're not allowed to take an isser and put it into a food in a ratio where it's nullified. I'll give you an example. I have a pot of cholent, and I take milk, and I drop a little bit of milk inside. You say, what are you doing? Milk and cholent is maybe not a good example. I take cholent, bas b'chalav is isser bishul. I take cholent, and I take chazer, and I take a little bit of chazer and drop it in. A little bit of chazer, drop it in. The rabbi said, what are you doing? I said, no, don't worry, it's batal b'shishim. Yeah, but you're not allowed to do l'chachila. You're not l'chachila insert an isser into your food, even though you know it's nullified. So if I take a bug, and I have a food, I know there's a bug, and I just pulverize it, so I'm in essence nullifying the bugs initially. Who says you're allowed to do that? So the reason why this is potentially different is because the Mechaber writes in Yeridei Simin Pei Dalet Sif Yud Gimel, Devash shenaflu by namalim. You have honey, and there are worms in the honey. So you have to get it out. The problem is honey is very, very thick and very sticky, and you can't strain it. So how do you strain honey? Yicham menu. You want to heat it up. By heating it up, it'll then pour, and then you strain out the bugs. The problem is that when you boil the honey, you're in essence cooking the bugs in the honey. And you're taking bugs, everything's cold, so right now there's no transfer of flavor. But when you heat it up, you're in essence cooking a bug soup. Now the bugs are nullified 1,000 times by the honey. So it's batal b'shishim. And you're not eating the bugs, so they're not a beria. You're just talking about cooking the bugs and then removing them. But you're adding a little bit of bug flavor into the honey. So l'chora, it's a problem. In essence, it's like dropping a little bit of bug flavor into the honey. Why is this allowed? So it says the Mechaber, it's mutter. Why? Why is it mutter to heat up in order to strain it? So it says the Taz, Ein kan mevatlin isla chachila, she'ein kavanasai el takan advash. Because your intention is not to add bugs. Your intention is just to make the dvash usable. In order to do that, you have to strain it. In order to strain it, you have to heat it up. Your intention by heating it up is not to add a bug flavor. It's not your kavana. So, ein mevatlin isla chachila is permitted if that's not your kavana. So, l'chora, it would seem that you'd be allowed to make a smoothie, because you're right. When you pulverize the smoothie and the strawberries in the smoothie and the blueberries and the raspberries, you're potentially pulverizing the bugs and making them nullified. But that's not your intention. You're not pulverizing it because you can get bug. I wish I could add some bug flavor to the strawberries. That's not what your intention is. Your intention is because you want a smoothie, and smoothies are eaten in that way. So Lecha Dodi should be permitted. Now, I will just say this. I saw Rav Habayis says a tshuva that he quotes some poskim that says this heter only applies when it's a suffix hechsher, but not when it's a vada hechsher. Meaning, if you know there's a bug there, to pulverize it is a problem. So the Star K feels that if it's the type of fruits or vegetables, the OU as well, the CRC a little bit more makel, they feel that if it's the type of fruits or vegetables where we know there are bugs, then it's a potential issue. But if you're not sure there's a bug, it's just a suffix, or it's a type where you'd have to check, so then it would be permitted. The CRC gives a whole list. Most fruits and vegetables can be pureed. Some you have to wash first. The OU says you should wash it first. That way it makes it not as severe. But roiv of the fruits and vegetables will be allowed to be pureed, even though you can't check them. If you're able to check them, then check them. But if they're frozen, you can't check them, then you'd be able to make them into a smoothie. Rav Habayis in a tshuva brings down this concept of when it's not your kavanah, and he says as follows: this is very relevant to many questions that come up nowadays. If your intention is not to nullify the hechsher, and we don't know there's a bug here, we're just worried there's a bug here, then it's going to be permitted. And that's the shita of Rav Habayis. Again, for each type of bug, you could always look it up and see. Most of them the CRC says is fine. Some of them they say you should rinse off first or try to soak first to try to remove the bugs if it's possible. But if it's not possible or they're frozen, then you'll be able to make them into a smoothie. So the next shiloh was, I was asked, you have someone who's in the process of converting, and when he converts, the question is, does he then have to tovel all of his kalim? It's a very interesting question, because we all know that when you buy a kli, a kli that is used in the preparation of food from a non-Jew, and it goes from non-Jewish ownership to Jewish ownership, you have to dip it in the mikveh. The reason why we dip it in the mikveh is the same way you have to tovel a person to go from the elevation from non-Jew to Jew. So to the kalim that are used, we also have to tovel from non-Jew to Jew. And this is learned out from the kli midyan, that they would get the kalim from the goyim that they got in the booty from the war. They had to tovel in the mikveh. So anytime going from non-Jew to Jew, you have to tovel in the mikveh. So if a person converts, he's also going from non-Jew to Jew. So in addition to be toveling himself in the mikveh, he should have to tovel his kalim as well. Now, I will say this. If the kalim were used, then before you even talk about tefillas kalim, you'll have to kasher them. Right? Tefillas kalim is in the mikveh. That's spiritually uplifting from goy to Jew. But then there's a concept called hagolas kalim, which means that if something was used for non-kosher, you have to purge it with heat, either with boiling water or with fire. If a non-Jew, let's say, has a soup pot that he used when he wasn't Jewish, and by the way, even if he was makban on kashrus, but it's bishul akum, right? Bishul akum also we paskin is machlekes, but we paskin it has to be kashered as well. So he'll have to kasher his dishes. We'll talk about bishul akum maybe. But let's say mam's use of chazer. It was when he wasn't Jewish, use of chazer. He has to kasher it. You can't tovel the mikveh when it's not kosher. That's like going to the mikveh holding on to a lizard. It doesn't work. Tovel sheretz b'yada. So you have to kasher it first. Then the question is you have to tovel the mikveh. So you have to tovel the kelim. So Rav Vosner in Shevet Alevi Chiliki Dalid Sim Tzadi Beis Ois Beis says you do. He says even though he acknowledges this is not the classic example, which is when you're gifted or purchased a kli from a guy, over here it just automatically goes from guy to Jew because it's based on ownership, and you changed, and that changed the kli as well. But he says, l'chayra, you'll have to be tovelit. You'll have to tovel it as well. That's the shita of Rav Vosner. So the Shemi Shmuel in Parshas Matos, Shnas Tafresh Ayin Ches brings from his father the Avnei Nezer that he disagrees. He says you don't have to be tovel them. He says when the convert himself tovels, the kedusha that's chal on him is chal on his kalim as well, and it does not have to. You don't have to dip those kalim into the mikveh. Tzitz Eliezer also brings this down, but Ravad Yosef, I'll tell you Ravad Yosef's psak. Ravad Yosef in Yabia Omer Chelik Zayin Yeridei Mincha says like this. He brings down all the opinions, and he says like this: metal, which has to be tovel deraisa, suffik deraisa, you should tovel it. But glass, which is only a rabbinic, then if it's you want to rely on those opinions that you don't have to tovel in the mikveh, okay, you have what to rely on. One last shiloh, and with this, someone said that they forgot to do Havdala on Motzei Shabbos, they have to do it on Sunday. So what is the procedure? I think I spoke about this in the past. The procedure is as follows. You don't say besamim, and you don't say ner. You don't say ner. The reason why you don't say ner is because ner is exclusive to Saturday night. The reason why we say ner on Motzei Shabbos is because that was when fire was created. That the first Motzei Shabbos, it started to get dark after Kiddush Shabbos left Adam Rishon, and he started to get frightened, and then Hashem gave him the chachma of making fire. So because fire was created on Motzei Shabbos, therefore you say the bracha on Motzei Shabbos. But anytime you're saying Havdala not on Saturday night, you don't say ner. Now, besamim as well, we say besamim because the neshama yisera is leaving you and you need a pick-me-up. So the smell is to uplift the person after losing the neshama yisera. Sunday morning, the neshama yisera is already gone and you don't need an uplifting anymore. You're already dealing with it. So you wouldn't say ner, you wouldn't say besamim. Now, the minhag of most people is not to say hine kel Yeshuasi either on Sunday. So you would just say bar piragofin and hamavdil. Chabad happens to say hine kel Yeshuasi on Sunday as well, but they don't say ner and they don't say besamim. I will stop here.